I'm Shirlaine from TSC Tuition, and today I'll be talking about inclusive language and exclusive language. If you're studying argument analysis, you will probably have come across these two persuasive techniques or persuasive devices. So today I'm going to talk about what they are and how they're different, and what you should be aware of if you're going to analyze these techniques or devices in your argument analysis essay. Simply put, inclusive language and also exclusive language are usages of words that assume the reader is a part of a group, or assume that someone else, usually an opposition of some sort, are not a part of a group that the reader and the writer are a part of. Very simply put, inclusive language are usages of words like we, us, our, and exclusive language are words like they, them, and theirs. When an author uses words like we as Australians, or we all know what it's like, or our shared values tie us all together. So phrases like this, or more specifically, the usages of these pronouns, assume that the reader is a part of a group that the writer is also a part of. So the phrase, for example, we as Australians should treat refugees more fairly, let's say that's the example sentence, that phrase assumes that the reader is Australian, just like the author is, and that by being a part of this group, there is some sort of a unwritten code of values or conduct that they've all agreed to. Now the thing is, you can read that article and not be Australian. You could be here on holiday, you could be here on a working holiday visa. You don't have to be Australian. You could be, if the article is online, you could be somewhere else entirely. So the phrase, we as Australians, are assuming that the reader is Australian and including them in that group of Australians, which therefore means that they share some sort of value or code of ethics or morality simply by being a part of this group. Exclusive language is pretty much exactly the same thing, but to exclude certain people from a group. So if the author writes, for example, politicians, they know nothing about what the ordinary Australian life is like, right? So the they is clearly referring to the politicians in that sentence, and it is excluding them, so assuming that they are not a part of the normal Australian experience, whatever that may mean. So the use of these pronouns, them and their, is positioning these people as being outside of a group that the author and the reader are a part of. Now, before you go off and circle every use of we, us, our, and call it inclusive language, you have to be careful that you are reading it correctly in the context, because the writer could mean that they, the writer, is a part of a group that the reader is not a part of. So for example, if the author is a committee member of some sort and this is a newsletter that they're publishing, they could very well say, we decided that this was the best option. Now clearly the we means that the committee as a whole has decided that this is the best option, not that we, as in the reader and the writer, have decided that this is the best option. So it's very important that we read these usages of pronouns and really read them in the context that we find them in, and make sure that the writer is saying what you think they are saying. Now, let's say that you have indeed found usages of inclusive or exclusive language. How do you analyze them? Well, in general, inclusive and exclusive language are there to assume that the reader is a part of a group of some sort, and that by belonging to this group there are certain obligations, or that there are certain codes of morality or values that they all share, and if they don't, then they're not really authentic members of these groups. So what that does is that it places pressure on the reader to accept whatever arguments are being made for fear of not being a part of this group. So in the sentence, we as Australians should treat more refugees more fairly, would place pressure on the reader to, because they feel like they're Australian, then therefore they should treat refugees more fairly, because then if you don't, then are you really Australian? And in the sentence, politicians, they know nothing about the ordinary Australian life. By assuming that the reader is a part of this ordinary Australian life, then they have to reject the politicians as, people who are out of touch, or people who don't really know what the common man experience is like. And if they do accept that the politicians do live an ordinary life, or that they do know what it's like, then perhaps you're not really living an ordinary Australian life, and thereby exclude yourself from this group. Either way, we can see that the use of these two kinds of techniques or devices are really there to place these sorts of unspoken pressure to conform and belong to certain groups in order to position people or arguments a certain way. Now, what exactly an author is doing will depend on the context and the arguments that they're making, and also what the author is actually saying. But in general, that's how exclusive and inclusive languages work. So I hope that was helpful. As always, like and subscribe to all of our social media channels so that you get our latest tips and tricks to achieving your best in your VCE English subject. And as always, if you'd like to get some one-to-one tutoring either online or face-to-face, please contact us and we can send someone to you. Thanks for watching.